All right, welcome to Hoops Tonight here at the Volume. Happy Thursday, everybody. Hope all of you guys are having a great week so far. We're going to get an instant reaction in for Eastern Conference Finals Game 2 as Boston goes up 2-0 on the Indiana Pacers. Going to break that game down from the perspective of both teams. And then we're going to do a mailbag at the end of the show today. So drop as many questions as you guys like. Let's have some fun. Let's go all over the place. Drop some questions in the chat. And Paul, our producer, is going to text them over to me, and we'll do a mailbag at the tail end of the show. You guys know the drill. Before we get started, subscribe to our brand new YouTube channel so you don't miss any more of our videos. Follow me on Twitter at _JasonLT so you guys don't miss show announcements. Don't forget about our podcast feed, wherever you get your podcast under Hoops Tonight. And keep dropping mailbag questions in those YouTube comments so we can keep hitting them throughout the rest of the postseason. And last but not least, before we get started, I want to talk to you guys about Game Time. They've got an amazing ticket buying experience. I had a great experience with them earlier this year as I went to McHale Center to watch the University of Arizona men's basketball team play. Got a last-minute seat, got a great deal. Knew exactly what I was getting myself into when I showed up. That's the best part about the experience. There's no hidden pricing. They have all-in pricing, so you know exactly what you're paying when you go to check out. You get a good picture of what your seat looks like before you show up to the arena, so you know what your money's getting you. And it's not convoluted. You can check out in as few as 2 taps. It's fun watching games on TV, but nothing beats being there in person to see these guys, and nothing beats intense, high-stakes basketball. So get out to the arena to see these guys, see Anthony Edwards, see Tyrese Haliburton, see Luka Doncic, see Jayson Tatum. Make sure you guys get out there and check it out. They also have things like flash deals and zone deals. I like the zone deal idea. You just pick a section. Game Time chooses the seats for you within that section. You get extra savings. Take the guesswork out of buying professional basketball tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code HOOPS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account. Redeem code HOOPS, that's HOOPS, for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, let's talk some basketball. So Celtics won this game with defense, in my opinion. It kind of went more or less like I expected it to after watching the film from Game 1. Again, as I talked about, I thought in Game 1 that Boston kind of got outplayed and specifically just wasn't sharp on the defensive end in a bunch of different phases. We went over a film session yesterday where I kind of showed you guys the specifics, just really struggling with communication and execution in their switches. So anytime Indiana would just run multiple interchanges, you know, and Indiana goes fast. I showed some examples in the film session where like in a 4-second span or in a 6-second span, they'd get to like 3 or 4 dribble handoffs or like 3 or 4 different cuts and screens and different interchanges, right? And like Boston just wasn't very sharp there. And then the second piece of it was the pick and roll. They really, really struggled handling Tyrese Haliburton and Miles Turner in pick and roll, right? And so one of the things I talked about was they get this win in the win column, but they're also going to get embarrassed when they go look at the film. And so they should come into Game 2 with the requisite level of energy and just kind of passion to rectify that situation, right? And like it was a little rough in the first quarter tonight, specifically when it came to handling the switches, but then they settled down. They had this awesome defensive run to start the second quarter. In particular, in that run, that 20-0 run that spanned the end of the first quarter into the early second quarter, they went from down 27-22 to up 42-27. And in that span, Indiana was trying to attack their switching by just throwing the ball down to the post, and their guards were holding up in the post. They were fronting the post and forcing turnovers. They were getting out in transition. Jaylen Brown was just unbelievable during that run. He was unbelievable in the entire game. And you know, there were a couple points where the Pacers kind of made little runs, but Boston seemed to be in control throughout. It was very, very different than Game 1 in the sense that I thought Boston just like actually asserted themselves, thoroughly outplayed Indiana and won in a very impressive fashion. Remember, the specifics that we talked about were communicating and executing switches better, which they did a much better job. The second piece was the pick and roll piece, right? So the direction that Joe Mazzulla went, which I thought was fascinating, he actually went with Jaylen Brown on Miles Turner instead of Jayson Tatum, although Jayson Tatum also spent time on Miles Turner during the game. And then they went with Horford on Siakam. And what was fascinating about that is it put all of the scoring pressure on Siakam, both in pick and roll and in their switching situations. The main reason why is Boston ran a lot of centerless lineups in this game by virtue of the wrist injury to Luke Kornet. It was a lot of like the 4 starters plus with Horford off the floor, and there'd be O'Shea Brissett in there, right? Or they did some with Sam Hauser as well. But a lot of these like small groups where they did a lot of switching. And in those groups, that again, when you look at Indiana, when Indiana's healthy, and when I mean healthy, I mean like the Tyrese Haliburton that we saw at the beginning of the season, they have two guys that can beat switches, right? Because Siakam can beat switches and Tyrese Haliburton can beat switches. But Tyrese, his first step just isn't as quick since he's had his hamstring injury. He was kind of starting to get it back, and then it seems like he might have aggravated it tonight, which is obviously frustrating if you're a Pacers fan. But because Siakam is literally their only matchup attacking forward that can do damage to switches, it just puts all of the scoring pressure on Pascal Siakam, both in ball screens and when they'd go to their switching attack. And for the most part, they did fine in ball screens. There were a couple of pick and pop threes that Pascal Siakam hit in the early third quarter, but other than that, like they kind of had that under wraps, right? And so like as a result, it turned into a lot of trying to attack in isolation situations. Like I said, the Pacers really tried to force the ball into the post, especially in that first half, and they just couldn't get anything going. Siakam was the one guy that they were able to get going. And don't get me wrong, he had an awesome game. He cooked everybody in the post with short little face-up jumpers, turnaround jumpers, quick driving moves to the basket. Like Siakam had an amazing night. But the flip side is because of the fact that you had Horford on Siakam and you had Turner with a wing on him, and because of the fact that they went to so many centerless lineups, it was just a lot of that type of ISO attack. It kind of removed the Haliburton ball screen from the equation. And he was also kind of unaggressive in this game, which part of that I think was the switching. Part of that was probably whatever was going on with his hamstring. But even though Siakam went off, you pretty much held everyone else in check and got out of there with the win. And again, I want to shout out specifically Derek White, Jrue Holiday, and O'Shea Brissett, especially in that 20-0 run there that spanned the late first and early second. Those guys all held up really, really well against massive size mismatches in the post, and it was a big part of how they got so many stops in this game. So smart adjustments from Joe Mazzulla in going small and putting keeping Horford on Siakam throughout. And then two, just better execution in their switches led to a much better defensive performance and a comfortable win for Boston. On the offensive end, literally everything was built around attacking Tyrese Haliburton. The vast majority of action that Boston ran in this game was two-man game with either one of the Jays and one of the guards, meaning Derek White or Jrue Holiday, right? When the guards were on the ball, it was about getting Tyrese Haliburton to try to navigate over the screen and contain a guy like Derek White or Jrue Holiday on the drive, right? Spent most of the time on Derek White. And there was a sequence in the third quarter that I thought best demonstrated this, right? Both of them were, one of them was on the left wing. I think one was at the top of the key, if I remember correctly. But it was Derek White, ball handler, Tatum setting the screen. Nesmith is on Tatum, right? Nesmith doesn't want to switch off of Tatum. Haliburton's chasing over the top because Derek White's an excellent three-point shooter, and you can't just duck underneath the pick. He's been torching people with that all postseason, right? So on the ball screen on the left wing, Nesmith kind of lunges and throws a token little, kind of like dig down at Derek White, but then he recovers back to Tatum. And so as Haliburton's chasing over the top, Derek White just easily gets all the way downhill and gets a layup. Very next possession, they run the exact same thing. This time, Nesmith is thinking, I got to help because Derek White just got a layup. So he sinks down into the lane and they effectively double team Derek White. Derek White pitches it back to Jason Tatum. There's a closeout from the wing. Tatum toasts that guy off the dribble, gets in the lane and dunks it. So like essentially you're damned if you do, damned if you don't, if you're Aaron Nesmith, because you didn't help. Derek White got a layup. You did help. Jason Tatum got a dunk. And so like that's kind of the predicament that they're in there with Tyrese Haliburton on Derek White. And then when the wings had the ball, so like think of that as like an inverted ball screen, right? So you have a forward essentially running a ball screen with a guard setting the screen. If Haliburton hedged, they would just try to drag the hedge out as far as they could so that it was a tough closeout. And then Derek White or Jrue Holiday would slip out of it to the top of the key and they get wide open catch and shoot threes out of it. Jaylen Brown generated a couple of threes for Derek White that way. Tatum generated some threes that way too. They just did a really nice job dragging that hedge out. And then if they didn't drag the hedge, like if they just switched, so like if Haliburton showed on that hedge and then whoever was guarding the forward, whether it was Aaron Nesmith or Andrew Nembhard, recovers and just stays home, just stays home and switches onto Derek White or Jrue Holiday, then Tatum would just kind of methodically back Tyrese Haliburton down into that 15-foot area and just get to those short-range jumpers. that he can make. And obviously he made got going in that third quarter stretch. Tatum had a rough start to this game, but had a good finish at the end. But like that was really the gist of it. Everything for Boston centered around attacking Tyrese Haliburton, either in ball screens where he was guarding the guard or in inverted ball screens where he had to hedge. And they just really don't have an answer for that. And that's a big part of Tyrese Haliburton's passivity in this game, right? Like you're wearing him out. You're just wearing him out by making him work on the defensive end the entire game. In general, I just thought the Celtics had a really good offensive night in terms of aggression towards the rim and decision making when they got there. That, like, again, like I said at the beginning, they got outplayed in game one and won anyway. That's not what happened tonight. The Celtics took care of business, played up to their potential, and they outclassed the Pacers as they should. They're a better team, and they took a 2-0 lead. Jaylen Brown, like, just an unbelievable night for him, goes for 40. He's the best overall athlete on the team, in my opinion, in terms of his first step, his start-stop quickness, his vertical leaping, his lateral movement on defense. He's a real wrecking ball type of athlete. And like he had 40 points in this game, but regardless of how it manifested in the box score, his athleticism was the driving force behind most of his positive impact tonight. Just flying around everywhere on defense. Yeah. Yeah, it must have died on me. No, you're good. Sorry about that, guys. We still live? We good? Okay. Sorry about that, guys. We're having random hiccups. I'm going to have to get a new Zoom box in here so that we stop having this issue. Anyway, Jaylen Brown was just, I thought, just a wrecking ball athlete in this game. He was flying around everywhere on defense. He had good on-ball possessions. He was jumping passing lanes and getting out in transition, running his lane in transition in general. He was flat out toasting people off the dribble and getting into the lane and drawing multiple bodies and throwing kick out passes. He did it in like just straight ISO situations. He did it a lot of work in semi transition. He had this like double crossover move. I think it was on Siakam along the left wing when he got all the way into the basket. He grabbed a couple of offensive rebounds. He had a play early where Aaron Nesmith was trying to box him out, but he's just smaller and not as strong. And Jaylen just kind of swum around the baseline, got in there and got a little hook shot off in the lane. Again, I thought he was the primary driving force of a lot of Boston's success tonight. And he was the guy that was really running the offensive end of that 20-0 run. We talked a lot about the guards and the job they did on defense, but Jaylen Brown was unbelievable on offense during that 20-0 run. I thought he just completely dominated this basketball game on both ends of the floor, so tip of the cap to him. And again, they needed it because Jason Tatum had a little bit of a rough night until the end, and Jaylen Brown more than made up for it. And then lastly, Derek White. His ability to run those ball screens with the Jays, and that means like duck under the pick, hit the pull-up three, chase over the top, get downhill, either make decisions or get all the way to the rim and finish. That ain't his ability to run those inverted ball screens where he could set a good pick and then pop to the three-point line and quickly get his feet set and shoot or make decisions out of it, driving the closeout. That is just a huge asset to this offense. It felt like every single three he hit tonight was huge in terms of the momentum situations in the game. Really, really impressive performance from Boston on both ends of the floor. On the Indiana front, so Boston has basically solved your offense by virtue of putting all of the onus on Siakam to score. That's what we talked about earlier, right? Like in ball screens, he has to score because Horford's in a drop. They're pressuring the rim and Siakam's popping out to the three-point line, right? So like he's got to hit those pick and pop threes. He's got to find a way to score if Horford recovers to him on the roll, right? And then when they go to when Boston goes small and they switch everything, he's the one guy who can consistently get quality shots against size mismatches in straight ISO situations, right? So like it's a testament to how important his addition was. And that's why I loved the trade at the time. Like I love the idea of like a offensive initiating like playmaker in addition to a matchup attacking forward or a matchup attacking anything, right? Like that's even why I like Kyrie Irving alongside Luka Doncic, right? Because Luka can be the engine of the offense and generate all these quality shots, but Kyrie, like, he can just go get a bucket, right? And he can attack specific matchups and just create something out of nothing. Same kind of thing with Jamal Murray and Nikola Jokic. Jokic is the offensive engine; he runs everything, and then you've got this guy that can go get a bucket, right? And so Siakam is kind of amounted to that for Indiana, but it's the reality of the limitations of this version of Haliburton, which is back before he hurt his hamstring at the beginning of the season, I thought he was pretty good beating switches. And it's because he just was so good with those long strides. He had a lot of like scooping layups where he'd like beat someone off the dribble and then kind of take like a little bit of a wide route and go up high. He was really good with floaters, but he's just not getting downhill as easily in this playoff run as he did before his injury. And so again, that's the ultimate version of this team. If the Pacers are going to achieve something greater in the future, it's got to be both of them. It's got to be Haliburton at this like peak version of himself as like a scoring playmaker, and then Pascal Siakam as that matchup attacking forward. Heading back to Indiana, I think they can get one based on the strength of their chaotic ball and player movement and the crazy pace that they play at and the home crowd. Like Indiana's undefeated at home in this playoff run right now, but Boston is undefeated on the road too. And so like if Boston doesn't relax, which by the way, they have a tendency to when they get a lead, but like if Boston doesn't relax, like this thing could be over in 4. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go with Boston in 5 for right now. Just simply because I do think Indiana has the ability to get one at home on the strength of their home crowd, but this could very easily be over in 4 games. Deeply concerning that Tyrese Haliburton's hamstring is flared up again because they just have no shot without him. All right, let's get to the mailbag before we get out of here tonight. If Haliburton is out, are you worried about Boston facing a much tougher team in the finals after coasting through the East? Here's the thing. This is the beauty of a 7-game series. So, like, yeah, there's something to be said about an adjustment if they go from, I mean, the main thing is just you're going to be going up against a much better defensive team. Like, Cleveland did not have the wings to throw at Tatum and Brown, right? Like, Indiana doesn't really either. Like, Aaron Nesmith does a good job, but he's kind of undersized, right? Like, same thing goes for that first round matchup against the Miami Heat. Like with Jimmy Butler out, they just didn't really have like the wing athleticism to hang with the Jays, right? So like it'll be an adjustment when they get to the finals and all of a sudden it's, you know, Jaden McDaniels and Anthony Edwards, or it's PJ Washington and Derek Jones Jr. Like you're definitely stepping up a level in competition. I mean, I don't even think Celtics fans would be crazy enough to think that any of these 3 teams they've played are as good as some of these teams out in the Western Conference. That said, like Boston's also on that level. Like throughout it all, like there's multiple things are true. Like, has Boston had an easy path through the postseason? Yes. Is the Eastern Conference substantially weaker than the Western Conference? Yes. But Boston is also a damn good basketball team who's every bit as good, if not better, than those teams in the Western Conference. So like, will there be an adjustment? Sure, but that's the whole purpose of a 7-game series. And also like you get rewarded for your success in the regular season. Like there was some of it's luck. Like I thought if you ranked the top 5 teams in the East, the other 4 after Boston all ended up in the other side of the bracket. So they only had to face one of those teams, which is good fortune. Sure. But like, you got that by virtue of the success you had in the regular season. Same thing goes with the home court advantage piece of it, because like, let's say it's an adjustment, but you also have home court, and home court in the NBA finals, whoever comes out of the West, it's going to be a lot of guys who have never played in the finals. Whereas for Boston, Derek White's been there, Jason Tatum's been there, Jaylen Brown's been there, Al Horford's been there. They've got a lot of guys that have been there before. So like, I would argue the home court piece and then them having finals experience, while the outside of Kyrie Irving, you're just not getting that out of the Western Conference piece of it. I think that Boston's going to be fine in that regard. Like, I don't think it's going to come down to Boston adjusting necessarily. I do think that could be a factor, but I think it's more likely just going to come down to, is Boston going to reach their ceiling? Are they going to have good decision making on offense? Are they going to bring consistent defensive effort? Is Jason Tatum going to be able to go toe to toe with whoever the best player is that comes out of that Western Conference team? Like if Jason Tatum runs into a Luka Doncic, let's say, I think Luka Doncic is the second best player in the world. Is Tatum going to be able to win that matchup the way that he badly lost? Like, because he badly lost that matchup against Steph 2 years ago, right? So like those are the things that I think are going to play a much bigger role for Boston than the adjustment period. Do you think that part of Tatum's inconsistency on offense is that he doesn't have a reliable spot that he is comfortable with? For example, the Jokic hook shot or the SGA mid-range. So I think that most of this just comes down to approach for Jason Tatum. And what I mean by that is, like, I actually do think that Tatum is capable of getting to a consistent spot on the floor where he can be profoundly efficient, consistently on a possession by possession basis. For me, that's the block. Like, I would love to see Tatum just work off the right block, cleared side, like that be his like go-to spot on the floor to operate. That's what I'm hoping for him in the long run. I think that part of his skill development has been overly focused on tough shot making. And the thing with tough shot making is there's real value in it. There really is. I'm not going to sit here and pretend like it doesn't matter. Like, and it's come through for Jayson Tatum in a lot of big ways over the year. I remember him hitting a huge right shoulder fadeaway from like 20 feet to ice the Bucks in Game 6 of the 2022 Eastern Conference semifinals. Like, he's gone to tough shot making in situations that have come through for him, and there is value. But to me, the value of tough shot making is rescue possessions, meaning like there's 5 seconds on the shot clock and I just need to get something up. Late game situations where it's like we're within 15 seconds left and I need to get a shot, or like it's they're switching everything and we're not getting anything open in our ball and player movement, so I just need to be able to get to my spot and knock down a shot. Like those are coverage beaters too. Like, if you're going against a drop coverage and a guy dies on the pick, like, yeah, you need to be able to hit a pull-up jumper. But like, Tatum just leans on him too much. Like, it's pull-up jump shots make up damn near half of his shot diet, and that's a problem. That to me is leaving meat on the bone. That is playing away from your strengths. You know what I mean? Like Tatum. I know this kind of is a strange comp because LeBron and Jayson Tatum are very different players, but like, LeBron developed an over-the-top shot-making game, but his best trait was he was bigger and stronger and more athletic than everybody, right? And so, like, the vast majority of LeBron's work was done in athleticism-based plays, whether it was transition attacks, attacking out of the post, like getting downhill in ball screens. And then LeBron would use pull-up shot-making as basically a ceiling raiser. And that's kind of what I want to see Jayson Tatum do. Now, I think he'll need a little bit more pull-up shot-making because he's not the straight line. He's not as like quick off the first step as LeBron James was, obviously. But Jayson Tatum is one of the biggest and strongest forwards in the league. He has the ability to guard centers in the post. He can demolish players with size mismatches. And so for me, it's just about kind of tilting some of his shot selection, like taking it from, like, if you just take 2 or 3 of those possessions a game where you take a pull-up jumper and you turn those into physically aggressive moves towards the basket, that to me will dramatically increase his consistency on the offensive end. But again, like, when we have these conversations, I think it's important to remind ourselves that Jayson Tatum is a Swiss Army knife that does a lot of really useful things for a basketball team. And this is not one of those things where it's like, oh, his jumper's not falling tonight, so now he's useless. That's not what it is. It's just he plays into more inconsistency by relying too much on his jump shot when he's not particularly good at it. And like, outside of like a month spanning late December to January this year, he was a bad pull-up shooter. So like, it's not a huge surprise that I think my microphone might have just crapped out again. Let's see. Oh, we're okay. But like, outside of like outside of that like month and a half there, like, he's a bad pull-up shooter. So it's not a surprise that like he gets into these situations and they're more inconsistent, right? But like, in terms of like where I think his spot will be in the long run, again, I think it's in that right block, cleared side, trying to go to work using his size advantages. Would you ever take a coaching job for a college program or the NBA? I would never take a college job, just because, like, a couple of things. If you are an assistant at the college level, you like, a good portion of your workload becomes like clerical work. It's a lot of like checking on the kids' grades, like recruiting visits, scouting visits, like things along those lines. It's a lot of that kind of stuff. And obviously, as a head coach, there's a lot of that kind of responsibility as well, especially on the recruiting side, right? And like, for me, like, I love basketball. I want to focus on basketball. So like, to me, college doesn't really satisfy that specific need. I think there would be just too much non-basketball related side of the business. I would love to coach in the NBA one day, but it's just completely unrealistic. Coaching is very much a fraternity. Everyone is very like, it's so, in order to get into that side of the business, you have to like take some job in a film room somewhere and just grind and grind and grind. And maybe, just maybe, you'll get an opportunity to be an assistant somewhere one day, or maybe you'll have some sort of connection. But like, chances are, like, as much as I'd love that opportunity, it's just unrealistic. And so it's not something that I plan on. But to answer the question, if the Charlotte Hornets called me tomorrow and was like, "Hey, do you want a position as one of our end of the bench assistants?" I'd be like, "Fuck yeah, let's go, let's do it." Just because for me, I like nothing. As much as I love talking about the game, nothing beats the competitiveness. Nothing beats like being in a locker room, being with those guys, and trying to achieve the ultimate goal and going after a championship of whatever type it is. But again, it's unrealistic, so it's not something I plan on. What's the biggest difference between this series and the Knicks series for the Pacers, where the Knicks also went up 2-0? I'll keep it really simple. Boston's a much, much, much better basketball team. Would Darius Garland be a good fit for the Lakers? I'm going to put it this way. I saw this moving around today. To me, Austin Reeves is like 95% the basketball player that Darius Garland is. You could argue he's a better playoff player. And he costs a tiny fraction as much. And he's already on the roster. So, like, to me, any sort of deal for Garland would require the aggregation of salaries and sending out too many good players. I think the Lakers would get worse. So I flat out don't like that kind of deal. Who would guard Jaylen Brown for the Mavs or the Wolves? So I think what they would probably do if it was Dallas is I think we'd see PJ Washington on Jason Tatum, and then I think we'd see Derrick Jones Jr. on Jaylen Brown. But I could see that matchup getting moved around quite a bit. Kyrie Irving has defended guards so well in this postseason run that I think that Kyrie could handle probably the Derek White assignment, right? And then I think they probably try to hide Luka Doncic on Drew Holiday, and they probably use Drew Holiday a lot as a screener. The thing is, this is the problem with Boston, and this is one of the reasons why, like, everyone keeps writing off Boston and saying the Western teams are better. And like, I may pick the Western Conference team, but like whoever comes out of the West, like even if I do pick them, it's like a 55-45 kind of thing. Like I think Boston is damn good, and I might end up picking Boston. I'm not sure. We'll see when we get to that point. But one of the main reasons why is because Boston just presents massive matchup problems for everybody. Like it's kind of like the Tyrese Haliburton piece. Like you're putting Tyrese Haliburton on Derek White. You have to put him on Derek White because Drew Holiday will punish him in the post, and like you can handle the Derek White problem with more team-based concepts. But like that's just the problem. Derek White's freaking amazing, and you're putting Tyrese Haliburton on him because you just have no choice. And like that's just the reality of the predicament that Boston puts you in because they have so many damn good basketball players. You know, like they have 4 dudes making over 30 million, and it's not like, oh, they're on bad contracts. They all deserve to be making at least that much. And then Derek White is the one guy who doesn't, and he probably deserves to make 35 million a year based on what he does on both ends of the floor. So like Boston's just super, super talented, and those are the problems that those are the predicaments that they can put you in. In terms of the Timberwolves, my guess is that they probably put Jaden McDaniels on Jason Tatum and Anthony Edwards on Jaylen Brown. But again, it's the same kind of thing. I think you'd see some interchangeability there. Let's see. That would be an interesting series for the Karl Anthony Towns kind of fit in terms of the matchups. And I wonder how often the Wolves would have to go small and put Nickeil Alexander-Walker on the floor. Let's see. Did players used to get this much shit for poor performances in just one game, or is it happening more now with more exposure in today's NBA? I've noticed this in general over the years with Twitter. Everybody wants to take victory laps or admit they're wrong after one game, which is like absolutely crazy to me. I mean, even just in the last round, let's see, like Dallas lost game 1 and won the series. Denver lost game 1 and led by 20 in game 7 in the second half, right? What was the Knicks went up 2-0 and the Pacers ended up winning that series. So like in general, when it comes to the postseason, like I am a big believer in like, no matter what you think, don't react to anything until you've seen multiple games and you've seen all the adjustments. Like, let's say Indiana wins game 1 without that, crazy Jaylen Brown shot. It's like, you could be like, oh my gosh, they can't guard pick and roll. And it's like, actually, they were able to come up with some adjustments in literally one game to be able to mitigate a lot of the issues. Just take Kornet out of the rotation, although Missoula was forced to. But like, take Kornet out of the rotation, put Horford on Siakam, and all of a sudden, like, you're just in a better position, right? So like another one too, like I went back and looked through the film, and Minnesota, I thought, played one of their worst defensive games of the postseason against Dallas in game 1. And so like, I just think that we see a more desperate Minnesota defensive effort in game 2, and I think Minnesota ties the series. And so now who knows, like Dallas is in commanding position and they very well might end up winning. But in general, I just don't understand the overreacting. And especially when it comes to the individual players. Like my thing is like I think criticism without praise is empty, and praise without criticism is empty, right? So like I have to be critical of Ant for the way he played in game one because I'm also the guy that praises him heavily when he plays well, right? Like I have it's just like with Jason Tatum. I've been very critical of Jason Tatum over the years, but like he was awesome in game one in so many different ways aside from the shot making. And it's like to me, like I have my biases. I do. I'm not going to sit here and lie to you guys. I emotionally, as a fan, root for the Lakers, right? On a non-emotional level, I have players that I'm a fan of and players that I don't like particularly well, right? Like, for instance, Luka's one of those guys. I've never been a huge Luka fan. There's some things about his game that bother me. The way he constantly complains at the refs bothers me. Sometimes the 25, 30 dribble possessions into an ice. I watched a game in the regular season this year. I want to say it was against the Pacers where Luka literally got the opening tip and ran 4 consecutive straight ISOs without passing the basketball to start the game. And it's like there are things about that as a basketball fan, I'm not a huge fan of. But at the same time, like I genuinely do try to fight against those things and to try to be as objective as I possibly can. My thing is like, I'm not going to lie to you and say that I'm, perfectly unbiased. I'm not. I have my biases. I have my likes. I have my dislikes. I'm just going to try like hell to do the best job that I can. I do, to put it simply, I take this job very seriously. The fact that you guys actually come to me and listen to my analysis, that you actually care about my opinion, I take that as a huge compliment, and I take that responsibility seriously. I want to make sure that I do this job the way that it's supposed to be done. I'm not perfect. I'm going to fuck up a lot. I say stupid shit sometimes. What was the one I had at the beginning of the last round where I said the Lakers might be or that the Wolves have is the same chance to beat Denver as the Lakers do? Like the Lakers did. Like that was stupid. I make mistakes. Like that's kind of just how it goes. But I'm gonna just do the best I can, and we'll see. I feel like I'm better at it than I was a few years ago, and hopefully I keep getting better at it over the years. Let's see. Tatum garners so much attention from defenses. Do you think this opens up Brown for games like this? So, to put it simply, like there are usually aggressive coverages lined up for the other team's best star, and there's usually traditional coverages lined up for any sort of supporting star. So, for instance, take Minnesota. Like Anthony Edwards is getting high drop coverage, double team on ISOs. Like he saw a ton of that against Denver, a little bit of it in game one against Dallas, where they're like really loaded up and digging down into driving lanes, high drop, like Ant's coming off of those ball screens and settling. He's not being as aggressive as he needs to be, but so much of it has to do with the coverages, right? The when it comes to like the game plan piece of it, then you look at Karl Anthony Towns and it's like, yeah, they will throw the occasional double team to him in the post, but like when they run Horn's chest and Ant dribbles off the Cat on the left elbow and Cat comes off of Naz Reid or Rudy Gobert on the right elbow and they throw the ball to him, they're not double teaming him or trapping him. Like he's getting traditional coverages, meaning he's getting the same coverages that every other team gets, right? And like a lot of that is or every other player, I should say, gets. And so a lot of that is like Jaylen Brown is going to have a certain different level of difficulty than Jason Tatum. That's a fact, right? And like if Boston ever did trade Jaylen Brown, like let's say 4 years from now they do, or let's say they have like another disappointing loss 2 years in a row, and then they end up trading Jaylen Brown. I don't think they will. I think Jaylen Brown will be a Celtic for a long time. But if Jaylen Brown goes to a team and is the best player on the team, his entire perspective on the game will change. Instead of getting the Aaron Nesmith point of attack assignment, like he's like right now he's getting Andrew Nemhard, right? Like instead of Tatum getting Aaron Nesmith, like if he was the best player on a team, maybe he gets Aaron Nesmith for the entire game, like, and he has success against Aaron Nesmith too. I'm not trying to say he can't, but like, let's say like the Minnesota assignment, like if they end up having to leave a lesser defender on one of the Jays, who are they going to do it? They're going to do it on Jaylen Brown, right? So like there is some reality to like to being lower in the pecking order and that making things easier. But again, as I used to always say with Jamal Murray, in my opinion, when it comes to basketball, your value is your value to your team. And regardless of what theoretical situation where Jaylen Brown is on some other team and he's getting tougher coverages, yeah, we can talk about that in terms of ranking players, but on Boston, he is the number 2. And so he does get favorable matchups and he does get favorable coverages. And so he does get to cook. And that's just the reality of his impact on this team. Would the Celtics fare better against the Wolves or the Mavs? Ooh, that's interesting. I would say, man, that's a really interesting question. To kind of talk through it, I think that the Mavs are a little bit more of a load up offense, whereas the Wolves are a little bit more of a stay home offense. And the big part of that is the Wolves have better defensive personnel down the roster. The Mavs have really good defenders. Derrick Jones Jr. is an excellent defender. Their rim protectors are excellent defenders. PJ Washington's done a nice job in this postseason run. But like Minnesota can go to lineups where they have like Rudy Gobert on the damn floor with Nickeil Alexander-Walker and Anthony Edwards and Jaden McDaniels, and they just have like just unbelievable defensive personnel everywhere. And so they can do what they did to the Suns, which is like stay home off the ball and try to make you play 1-on-1 or 2-on-2. And so I think Minnesota's defense is more capable of making Boston's offense struggle. But I also think that I think that Dallas's offense is better than Minnesota's. And so like I think there would be different strengths and weaknesses and challenges for both matchups. Man, that's a really good question. I'm sorry that I don't have a better answer for you at this point, but we will definitely get into it once we get further into the Western Conference Finals. I really want to see how the Wolves defense bounces back tomorrow night. Again, I thought they were really bad in game one, and I'm just curious to see if they just come out and throw just a hellacious defensive punch and how Dallas responds to it. Do you think this T-Wolves team is like the 2022 Celtics, an ascending superstar and dominant team defense? That's actually a really good comp. A lot of people don't like. I'm Celtics fans, you probably remember, but like a lot of people around the league think of this Boston team as like kind of the same type of team as the 2022 Celtics, and I very much don't. Like, to me, the 2022 Celtics were not as good offensively, but they were a team who hung their hat on the defensive end of the floor. I saw the 2022 Celtics throw some of the craziest defensive punches for entire games that I had seen from teams in recent NBA history. Like, to me, that 2022 Celtics team wasn't as talented as this Celtics team, but like this Celtics team is almost a victim of their own talent in the sense that they can oscillate in effort, they can be inconsistent. And like the 2022 Celtics, they just played so damn hard every single night. It really came down to some bad rim decisions hurting their transition defense, and then Jason Tatum just kind of fell apart in the finals, and that was really the only things that went wrong for them. Someone wants to know my thoughts on Joe Mazzulla. Here's the thing. I think Joe, what drives me crazy with Joe Mazzulla is just the entire offensive approach from Boston, where there's very little hierarchy. There's very like quick decisions. There's a lot of like settling. There's a lot of like, let's just find like run up the floor and run quick action and take a three within like without even getting like a paint touch. There's a lot of like inconsistent offensive approach from Joe Mazzulla. And like, I talked about this a lot with Darvin Ham. Like, to me, one of the most important elements of a head coach in the NBA is possession by possession accountability. What I mean by that is like deeply valuing every single possession and building the habits that will carry you in the NBA finals or in the NBA playoffs. Because once you get to this point where you need to win 16 games in 2 months, so much of it comes down to like execution and avoiding mistakes and like not having these 2-3 minute stretches where you lose your damn mind. And like one of the characteristics that is really like kind of encapsulated this Boston team over the last 2 years under Joe Mazzulla is a lack of value of the individual possession and extended stretches where they lose sight of their identity and play down to their competition. And so like, to me, that is on Joe Mazzulla. And like when you focus too much on the big picture and like our overarching shot value and all those different kinds of things, like, to me, that fails to drive home the bigger picture topic of what you're going to need when you play the best teams down the line. So for instance, let's say you end up playing Minnesota in the finals. Like, that's going to be a tough series. And in that series, you need Jason Tatum to be awesome. Because a lot of the stuff that Boston does offensively, through guys like Drew Holiday, through guys like Derek White, through guys like Al Horford, a lot of that is going to work at a much lower level of effectiveness against Minnesota's defense. And so, or even Dallas's defense. And so much of it is going to come down to like Tatum's going to have to take the reins of the offense. And so like part of it to me is like, I wish that Joe Mazzulla had done more work over the course of the season at just kind of building out at least some sense of hierarchy. That's not to say that you don't want Jason Tatum to get the ball moving around and keep everybody involved. And for the record, I think he's awesome at that. And I think that's why he's such a perfect fit for this team. But like, I do think that there's just been a little bit of a lack of accountability in terms of their consistency of defensive effort and their consistency of offensive execution. And I do attribute that to Joe Mazzulla. So like, not my favorite NBA coach, but at the end of the day, like, I don't think he's going to be the main driving force of whatever this outcome is in this postseason run. It's going to come down to the players. They have the talent. I think it's unfair to put any sort of blame on Joe Mazzulla, even if I'm not necessarily a fan of his coaching style. Would you rest Porzingis to the finals now? Yeah, there's just no reason not to. Unless Porzingis strictly wants to come back so that he can build his rhythm and conditioning, then that's fine. But like, you certainly don't bring him back unless he feels 100% ready to play. Has Minnesota faced a defense with the tools that Boston has? Yes, they're facing it right now. The main reason why is like Boston is not super athletic at the center position. Al Horford's a good positional defender, and Kristaps Porzingis is a good rim protector when he's in a deep drop coverage. But Porzingis is not overly quick and can struggle sometimes when he has to come out to the level of the screen. Lively and Gafford are both like really, really athletic centers. And so I think that Minnesota has Dallas. I think Dallas has better rim protection than Boston does, but Boston's perimeter defense personnel is outrageous. And like, when you go 1 through 4, only Minnesota can say that they have, I think, better defensive players on the perimeter than Boston does. Like, having Drew Holiday and Derek White, who, by the way, I talked about it tonight, like, they held up in post-up mismatches extensively in this game. They can guard bigger players. They can guard smaller players. Derek White's one of the best shot blocking guards in the league. Jaylen Brown can be this deeply, profoundly impactful defensive athlete. Jason Tatum, obviously, as we've talked about so many times over this playoff run, is this deeply, profoundly impactful athlete. So like, I don't think Minnesota's faced a defense that has Boston's perimeter personnel, but I think Dallas, between the Derrick Jones Jr. on the ball and those centers, those super athletic centers around the rim, I think Dallas has had a little bit better rim protection. But you're right. I mean, I think Boston's defense would give Minnesota some issues. And by the way, Porzingis would be a massively important part of that series, and they most likely would run a deep drop coverage to try to keep Porzingis at the rim to continue to shut things off from Ant, kind of the way that Dallas has. All right, guys, that is all I have for tonight. As always, I sincerely appreciate you guys for supporting the show. No show tomorrow morning. We're just going to run this mailbag as a breakout. I have a scheduling conflict, so I'm actually unavailable during the day tomorrow. But the mailbag will be up as a breakout, and then I will be back tomorrow evening after the final buzzer of Game 2 of the Western Conference Finals. I will see you guys then.